found a portal to a parallel universe? What if you could slide into 1,000 different worlds?
Hello and welcome to How to Fix It, and to our yearly Sliders review. The poll has closed, and the winner is Lipschitz Live. Honestly, I did not expect that one to win. I put it in because it's one of the weaker Season 4 episodes, but I figured that El Cid, considering that it's one of a few bad episodes in a really good season, would have been the clear winner. But no, it was this one. But don't worry, there's plenty of bad in this one, so it's not a waste. So, apart from my original Sliders review way back in the episode 3 of this show, we haven't really talked about Season 4, so allow me to give some backstory. Season 4 was a time of a lot of problems for the show. After Season 3 ended, Fox had cancelled them, but like it happened for several other cult classic shows, including Mystery Science Theater, they were saved by the Sci-Fi Channel. But problems arose. Between Seasons 3 and 4, Sabrina Lloyd, who played Wade, walked off the show, ostensibly to pursue new roles, but as stuff became clear later on, it was likely also related to David Peckinpah and the change in atmosphere after John Rhys-Davies' firing, as far as interviews with other cast members go. But the other three were still coming back, and adding in a new fourth slider in the form of Charlie O'Connell, Jerry O'Connell's brother. Sliders was also adding in a new story arc, which makes sense, considering that the Season 3 finale culminated in Wade and Rembrandt apparently going home to Earth Prime. That new story arc was not great. It involved Quinn not actually being from Earth Prime, but from a world where humans and Cro-Mags were at war, and his parents splitting him up from his twin brother Colin and hiding them on separate worlds because... Insert your own Star Wars joke here. Anyway, their parents don't reclaim them, being unable to find them, and when Quinn returns after the Cro-Mags invade Earth Prime, Quinn's adoptive mother gives him a device that his real parents gave her so that he can locate his brother and then they can find their parents. We also discover that Wade was taken and sent to a Cro-Mag breeding camp, which I am not going to go into detail on because my blood pressure is already high from my Dino Charge Paradox rant last week. Just go watch the old Requiem review. Long story short, the new team is on a mission to find Quinn's true homeworld and find out how they can finally destroy the Cro-Mags and save Rembrandt's Earth. This episode has nothing to do with that arc, but I just wanted you to know where Sliders fans were coming from to explain a lot of my issues with the episode. And because I'm stalling for time, because there's not much to say as an intro. The episode is basically shock treatment without the songs. It's about a world that's basically run by television and broadcasting corporations with major monopolies. But the only show that's really out there that everyone watches is Lipschitz Live, which is basically a cross between a news program and tabloid talk shows like Jerry Springer, with everyone gawking at the crazies and weirdos that show up on the show. While this is going on, a giant corporate merger is happening, and when the Sliders get split up due to television signals interfering with the timer, Colin gets dragged into his double's life, which is an entire can of worms in and of itself. If the episode sounds promising, you're not wrong. But this is the episode that you guys wanted to see reviewed, so even though I haven't watched this since my initial viewing of it, I can safely say that they find some way to screw it up. This is Lipschitz Live. The episode centers around the foursome getting separated when the vortex releases all of them in different spots. Quinn and Colin end up in different alleyways, and Rembrandt and Maggie end up on a window washing scaffold to hopefully reenact the ending to Doctor Who's Partners in Crime. Clavant Derricks as the Doctor might actually make for an amazing show. Better than this episode, at least. They see Colin wandering the city below them, as Quinn makes his way to the Chandler Hotel, but is unable to get a room thanks to a big corporate merger event happening. He goes to sit by the bar as everyone is absorbed in watching the titular Lipschitz live, which, as I said, is basically a parody of Jerry Springer and tabloid talk shows of that nature. Though an interesting thing is it's one of the only television shows on TV, thanks to corporate monopolies run by the Unabomber of all people. Which would have been a really clever joke in season 1 or 2, but here it's just a cheap one-off gag that doesn't really make sense, considering that if he was still the Unabomber on that world, he probably wouldn't be running a television station. Unless that's like a weird nickname or something. As Quinn awaits the arrival of everyone else, Colin shows up, only to be watched by another Colin? The other Colin watches as men in suits kidnap Colin, revealing that the other Colin is getting married, as corporate mergers on this world are like how medieval alliances worked in the Middle Ages, through marriage. Maggie and Rembrandt show up, and because the desk clerk is engrossed in Lipschitz, he sends them up to the other Colin's room when they ask if anyone named Mallory was staying at the hotel. They go in, and in a giant out-of-character moment for both of them, they just assume that the room belongs to their Colin, despite the mountain of evidence to the contrary. I'll go into this a bit later, but just realize, Rembrandt has been sliding for 4.5 seasons. Maggie for just about 1 season. They should know better! They start chasing down the other Colin, despite the fact that not only is his demeanor different, but the alternate Colin is apparently a New Yorker and has the accent. Not a very good one, I might add. He gets hit by a car and ends up in the hospital, while Quinn realizes that the only way he can manage to get a message to the others is by playing along and going on Lipschitz Live, since every TV in the area is tuned in. Colin, meanwhile, the real one, who I remind you is from Amish world, and so not a New Yorker, finds himself attending the other Colin's wedding to a rival corporation's heiress, Roxanne. Not that one. She doesn't want to get married, but it's business, so they have to. Colin is opposed to it because he has to find his way back to the group and he can't get married. Quinn gets on the show and shouts his message of how much time they have to slide to the others, as he has to be interviewed alongside a man who claims to be an interdimensional traveler who dresses like Future Boy from Quantum Leap. I'm not even joking, that's the same costume. During the interview, Quinn starts losing the audience because he's talking science, and the other guy starts winning them over with crazy pseudoscience bullshit. And to get them back, oh dear God. He mentions meeting his female double, Logan St. Clair, and of course the first thing Lipschitz asks is if he had sex with her. I should have expected this from the producer who put Wade in a breeding camp because he thought it was funny. After other Colin gets out of the hospital, Remy and Maggie finally figure out that he's not their Colin and rush back to the hotel to swap Colins before the slide, but Colin and Roxanne have already made their way to the studio so that Colin could reunite with Quinn. They meet up with other Colin's dad and head to the studio, with other Colin getting a rushed arc of him and Roxanne ending up liking being married or something, as everyone reunites and Quinn gets to give a giant middle finger to the fake interdimensional traveler as he activates the timer and the foursome slides out to their next adventure as the episode ends. The premise of them being split up, that the TV signals interfered with the timer, is interesting. It's a better explanation than just the timer is glitching. I don't know how much scientific sense it makes, but as a narrative explanation, it justifies them being split and doesn't rely on something stupid happening to justify it. And Barry Lipschitz is played by Charlie Brill, who played Arn Darvin in The Trouble with Tribbles and its Deep Space Nine sequel, Trials and Tribulations, which, as a Star Trek fan, makes me tolerate this episode just to see the actor, cause it reminds me of what good science fiction is. Speaking of Star Trek, I think something important is happening at the end of September. Anyway, the concept of TV corporate monopolies running the world is a really cool concept that, apart from the merger and some lip service to the world's history from the bartender, we learn almost nothing about. If they actually explored that outside of the stuff with Roxanne, it might have actually been good. They also get some nice digs at Fox for screwing with the show through upper management, while Quinn tries to get on Lipschitz Live with him being told that no one wants a cerebral science fiction series. Considering that Fox is still like that nearly 2 decades later, something that should have been a dated reference is all too current. And the stuff with the audience rejecting Quinn's smart sci-fi stuff for Future Boy's pseudoscience was really interesting, but we sort of already had that concept with Dead Man Sliding on the Game Show World back in Season 3, where Arturo and Quinn explaining the intricacies of sliding for the masses was met with rejection and derision because it wasn't compelling TV. On to the characters. Holy shit! Quinn actually acts like himself. He shows emotion. He comes up with a brilliant plan. The director for this episode must have been amazing. Oh, I see. Either Jerry only shows emotion for himself, or he was the most competent director that the show had had since before Exodus. Personally, I think it's the latter. And Quinn's idea to send the message via going on Lipschitz Live and using his sliding experiences to keep himself on the air is a really damn intelligent plan. Smarter than this episode deserves, if you ask me, but a smart plan nonetheless. And I would be remiss if I ignored the fact that while acting for 2, Charlie O'Connell, despite being a weaker actor than the other 3, manages to put in 2 very distinct performances. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's the same caliber as, say, Patrick Troughton in Enemy of the World, but both Collins act, sound, and give off the feeling that they're different people, which ultimately works against the episode by making Rembrandt and Maggie's not realizing that other Colin is a double all the more glaring, but I digress. Also, the end of the episode has a really funny joke in it. When Remy, Maggie, and other Colin are trying to get into the show and are told that Lipschitz already has a Colin Mallory, Rembrandt makes up that the other Colin was separated at birth and raised by dolphins, followed by other Colin making a dolphin noise.
Listen. This is Colin Mallory's identical twin. Kidnapped at birth. Raised by dolphins. Just let us in.
Which actually got a genuine laugh out of me. But I remind you that this was at the end of the episode, in the last 5 minutes. I had to sit through 40 minutes of garbage to get one good joke? Oh my god, it's Batman v Superman all over again. But that's a rant for another video. Another interesting bit, and this is purely personal reason, but Quinn stole my look in this episode. And I mean, honestly, who wears it better? Obviously, it's me. Michael, I don't really understand the significance of all this. Just say the line. We'll be right back with more of the show after I perform a few scans. And we're back. Everything's working fine. This thing's not even on. Why do Rembrandt and Maggie not realize that the other Colin isn't their Colin? Like I said, they're seasoned sliders. They understand the concept of doubles. Hell, they've met their own doubles before. For Rembrandt, multiple times. I mean, they go into the room, see a bunch of stuff that their Colin obviously didn't have time to buy, and that doesn't tip them off? That's wildly out of character for both of them. But even if you assume that on the last row they both got concussions that messed with their heads to make them believe that the stuff in the room was their Colin's, the fact that his voice was different should have given it away. Colin is Amish. He's not Johnny friggin' T.
You learned this in the 3rd grade, dummy.
The episode, due to the nature of them being split up, features a lot of the characters having to explain sliding to the guest stars. most likely as filler to get the episode to 44 minutes. In doing so, we're shown that not only does Colin, the newest slider, pick up on the concept of his double faster than the seasoned pros, and I remind you that Colin had never actually met one of his own doubles before, but Roxanne and other Colin's dad pick up on the double thing faster than the two seasoned sliders. Another thing that drives me up the wall is that they think they're being cool by giving us some references to older episodes, especially Double Cross, which I don't know if it's a fan favorite, but it's definitely one of my personal favorites. But it just reminds me of what could have been. Note how they asked Quinn if he had sex with Logan. Now, apart from the fact that Logan was a murderer and a manipulator who used the fact that she was Quinn to know what buttons to press to get him to help her, but she was supposed to be a recurring antagonist like Rickman later would be. Wanna know why they never brought her back? Fox didn't think Zoe McClellan was attractive enough to be a recurring character. You know, I scheduled this review this week because I thought, because I had done all of the rage-inducing stuff already, that this would be a nice, easy reprieve after the big angry rant in Dino Charge. I had forgotten that even when the episodes just had a mediocre story, they can still find a way to drive me up the goddamn wall. Not only do they remind me of a much better episode with that line, not only do they reduce what could have been the show's greatest antagonist after the original iteration of the Cro-Mags to a sex joke, which is just enough to make me tempted to snap the DVD in half, but we also reduce Maggie, badass fighter pilot Beckett, to someone for the other Colin to feed shitty pickup lines to. Listen, I hate Maggie Beckett, for sure. Until season 5, she is by far the worst written character of the main cast. But when part of her character is supposed to be a take-charge military person, God! Off of the really rage-inducing stuff, the episode seems to be confused if it wants to dig at Jerry Springer or dig at megacorporations. It's gotta pick one. Both ideas are fairly promising, but because they're smashed together, it feels like neither of them are developed as much as they needed to be compelling. I like the idea of corporate mergers through marriage. I also like the idea of tabloid talk shows running the world, but neither of them are developed enough to give us a picture of the world's inner workings. Also, the Lipschitz Live stuff feels like if someone tried to make an episode out of the Weird Al one-week parody, Jerry Springer. This is less heinous, but a budget thing that throws me is that for being the only show on television, and an uber-popular show, Lipschitz Live doesn't really look like it. The sets for Maury and Jerry Springer look furnished and stuff. This is just Lipschitz and his interviewees on a small, darkened stage. Honestly, it looks more like the World of the Psychic from Ghostbusters 2 than a big-budget show run by a major conglomerate. It's minor, but it's something that delegitimizes the premise for me. Another thing that I hated was how the episode tried to create its own running gag of whenever Colin would be confused about what his double's father or fiancé were telling him, they'd respond with, "Have you been drinking again? I've warned you about that." Which doesn't make any sense since we don't see any evidence of Colin's double being an alcoholic. I think Quinn and Maggie drink more than he does in the episode. I've certainly got my work cut out for me this week. First things first, Maggie and Rembrandt should not mistake Colin's double for Colin. As I have said several times in this video, they should know better. As such, I would get rid of the entire mistaken identity subplot, at least on Rembrandt and Maggie's end. Colin getting basically kidnapped and forcibly taken to the wedding still works. Stuff like that is par for the course when you have the possibility of doppelgangers. But what if, instead of Rembrandt and Maggie being idiotic, they try to break up the wedding, but other Colin and Roxanne's dads kick them out? Colin wants to go, but they can't get near him through all the security. Then, as they're trying to figure out how to get Colin out before they slide, they run into other Colin, who they demand go and take his rightful place so they can get Colin back. Thus, Other Colin's arc actually takes place over the course of the entire episode, and not the last 10 minutes. They try to tell him that even if he doesn't want to get married to Roxanne, it might still be good for him. Of course, he refuses, and then they give him the angle that their Colin will inherit his fortune, which gets his attention, and they rush back. Maybe Colin does a grand gesture on TV that Other Colin sees, which shows Roxanne and Other Colin that he can be so much more than he is, and that even if they don't want to be married, they can use their newfound power to improve the world that they live in. In the first 2 seasons, with the exception of a few episodes here and there, most of the episodes didn't have them saving the world with the grand fight scenes and explosions. And I'm not saying that's bad, but what I liked about those episodes was that they didn't save the worlds they landed on. They helped the people who lived on those worlds gain the opportunity to help themselves improve it, which honestly I feel is the more optimistic way to go about it. Like in The Young and the Relentless, where Arturo and Rembrandt helped their lawyer realize that she'd become jaded in the system. Or in Greatfellas, where, yeah, they got involved in the big operation at the end, but their showing up with another Rembrandt motivated his double, and afforded the government the opportunity to fight back against the mafia when they let their guard down when they think they have the FBI director. Do the same thing here. Have Colin, Maggie, and Rembrandt show Roxanne and Other Colin that even though they don't want to be married, that they can still use that to improve their situation. And maybe, just maybe, they actually like each other more than they realize once Roxanne and Other Colin see our Colin. I'd also cut out that running joke of Other Colin being a drunk, or, and this might actually be too smart an idea for this show, actually show us that he's a drunk, therefore giving that joke a reason to exist. And as for the Logan St. Clair reference, why do I have to keep saying this when I review things? Stop mentioning better episodes in your shitty one. It doesn't make me go, oh yeah, that episode existed. Neat reference. It makes me go, oh yeah, I should be watching that episode instead of this steaming pile of garbage. That doesn't even touch on the casual sexism aspect of it. So, if you can't make your reference do justice to the character, maybe just don't reference them, okay? Also, give Maggie more to do. Maybe in this version, she's the one who notices the other Colin, and knowing that he's the one supposed to be getting married, chases him down and tackles him to get his attention. It's not that much better, but at least she does something apart from get-fed pickup lines. I'd also develop the world more. Maybe as Maggie and Rembrandt try to find out how to save Colin, they research the corporations to find out what this world's deal is with mergers and stuff, therefore developing the world. While that's going on, Quinn does the same plan he had in the episode, because that was the only good thing that actually made sense. Additionally, make the Lipschitz live set look like the only show on television. If it was the only show on television, wouldn't it have a much bigger budget and look nicer? You could do the same thing that they did in the high school auditorium with a creative lighting setup. Give us a furnished set, carpeting, really good lighting. Make me think that this is the only show on TV. With that in mind, this episode might have actually been good if they just put a fraction more effort into it.
Sliders.
And that was Lipschitz Live. I'm not even going to ask if it was good, because if you actually watched the video and didn't just skip to this point, you already know that it wasn't. I didn't think it was possible to rival The Exodus with out-of-character, disgraceful writing, but I was sadly mistaken. And the worst part is, the worst thing about this, is that there is good in this episode. I can't just write this off as a bad episode, because they got Quinn right. They got the one character that they hadn't gotten right in an entire season, and they got him right in this episode. This and World Killer are the only 2 season 4 episodes where I can say we actually get to see the Quinn I remember from season 1 and 2. It drives me utterly insane that I have to sit through 44 minutes of this garbage to actually see the character that we started following in the first few minutes of the pilot. I don't know what the next viewer request poll is going to be, but I can definitely say that we're probably going to do another one of these for next year's Sliders review. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of how to fix it, you can hit that subscribe button. And if you have any comments or complaints about the video, you can put those in the comment section below. Oh, and if you want to be notified of new uploads, you can hit that bell icon. And if you enjoyed this video, show it to your friends and share it around the internet. And maybe consider supporting the show on Patreon. See you next time for another Patreon-sponsored review. Though, unlike Condor Man, this one is definitely way outside my comfort zone. Be able to see this. Oh, whoopsie. I gotta cover my drink. This is gonna be very big. Okay, so, admittedly, snapping the disc might have been a mistake. I'm gonna be finding pieces of this in 6 months like Easter grass, aren't I?